Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Good morning.
Long time no see. Dr. Marie, how are you?
I'm hanging in. How about you? I don't know what happened last week. The door was closed.
Well, it's open now.
Good morning.
Here's Jay. We're just talking about you. Pete sent the list.
I saw the list briefly. I didn't really get a chance to flip through it in any detail, but
I'm looking at it now myself.
the comment about Delta and autism. First of all, autism isn't one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
There is a subset of autism that have white matter developmental changes, and their white matter is either overdone or underdone. Either way, you don't have white matter input to the cortex.
Mm-hmm.
That if you don't myelinate enough, it's not really a high speed white matter input, and if you put on too much, it turns off the neuron. So if you have a deviated myelination when you're developing very, very, very early in brain development, you basically end up having areas of the brain that don't have inputs, and the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe are particularly prone to that. You see excess frontal, especially at the midline, and big temporal delta. And if you look at the diffusion tensor imaging, you actually see the delta as white matter changes. Now, if you actually pay attention to the literature, which I kind of recommend, you see Mario Beauregard and Montreal Neurological, which I think they've renamed in some fashion. I don't recall what they've called themselves now, but he's done 2 studies where the neurofeedback was shown to sculpt white matter and gray matter. And then Dr. Pineda, Jaime Pineda in San Diego with an NIH grant for studying autism. We did the QEEG stuff for that grant gratis because they got $3,000 to do the QEEG analysis, but it's 100 studies, so that's $30 a piece. I told them that's more. It costs us more to do the report than that. So you just keep your money. We'll do it. You can use the money on something else in your study, But I got to see their diffusion tensor imaging data and the neurofeedback. Let's say you were working with the right temporal on somebody who had an Asperger's like presentation. That's the area that the white matter ends up being changed in. So when you look afterwards and you see the delta and slow content drop in an area, if you were able to afford it, you could do a DTI and probably see the associated white matter change. The International Federation basically of Clinical Neurophysiology says that you get delta in the cortex when there's a decrease in white matter input to the cortex. The cortex acts as a sheet dipole. A whole bunch of dipoles acting in unison, essentially like parallel conductors, and the large delta arises because there's no input into the cortex. Now that happens early in life when you're not myelinated, and it also happens with sleep when your brainstem and thalamus quit sending information up to the cortex. So you have slow wave sleep when the cortex is not being innervated. It's busy. Actually, delta is a positive perfusion. When you're asleep and actually sleeping, your brain is busy. And if you're sedated unconscious, that's Michael Jackson's sleep. You could go on propofol and be totally unconscious for the entire night, but you didn't sleep. You were just knocked out for the night. Now, as much as that black hole is apparently attractive to some people as an escape, sleep is really important as a thing you do it's like going to the gym at night for your brain, so you need to have intact sleep.
Don't
And
forget this mild connection with death, Jay. They just that itsy bitsy connection if you take a little too much.
Some of the other questions escaped me. I just remember having seen that
Actually,
one.
Jay, given we're on this one, do you mind extending a little bit? I talk about how marijuana influences the myelination. The development in the teens is a big one. We can even jump into Parkinson's. The white matter and the myelination, I think, is a big topic. Do we want to jump a little bit, Peter? Do we want to stick to your list?
Go ahead.
No, it's just, as Jay was, well, I don't think Jay said, we kind of assume that delta is this, drowsy kind of negative state, this kind of links in a little bit to question 2 when you're talking about cognitive performance and cognitive delay in children. We assume that you want to get rid of it all to make a person more cognitively acute. But in younger phases of life, the delta is a really good place to be, as part of the developmental cycle. And as Dave was also saying, it's absolutely critical in sleep. So it's kind of like, a lot of us talk about alpha, about the varied roles of alpha based on age, location, what you're doing, et cetera, and of course the frequency within the frequency. And I would say the same thing for delta. Delta can be a sign of a serious head injury. Okay, it can also be a sign of a really good sleep. Yes, we have to be really, really careful about what we're seeing in the EEG and why, and under what conditions.
Yeah, and the delta band is defined as a frequency band. Well, within that frequency band, you have rhythmic slow waves that are delta, and then you also have slow content. That's the baseline the EEG rides on, the slow cortical potential. And when it goes electronegative, it can turn on a network, and when it goes electropositive, it can turn off a network. That's the signal that Birbaumer trained in Europe to turn on and off seizures, the slow cortical potential. Now, there are a lot of people working at infra-low, infra-slow. It's the same basic, very low frequency band range. It's in the delta band, but it's not delta rhythm. So when you've got a broad band and you get one big head that's the delta band, you still don't know, is this like way slow stuff below 1 hertz that's adding into this band, or is this a rhythm up at 3 hertz? You just get a big broad band. So years and years and years ago, when the computer digital EEG got a little fancier and they could make more than just big broad bands, they got to 1 hertz bins, and they could see the resolution within a band. Alpha has 2 peaks in this person, and the same thing in the delta band. You can have an infra-low upsweep at the left-hand side, which reflects neocortical dynamics. If you don't have that upsweep at the left-hand side, you're stuck in a network and you're not flip-flopping between networks. If you change networks, the brain is going to have a rise and fall in the baseline to turn on and off the areas that have to be turned on to form the network, and they'll be turned off. So the rising and falling on the baseline is going to be this upsweep at the left-hand side. If you're stuck in the default mode, you got lots of alpha. But if there's no salience and central executive, there's all sorts of networks, as you know, and they can flip-flop between networks based on what your brain is doing. If your brain isn't doing anything, you don't see that upsweep. And when you look at the EEG and the left side is flat as a pancake, the person has no neural network dynamics. You're looking at them stuck in whatever state they're stuck in. And when you unstick them and they become dynamic again, that left side of the upsweep will end up reoccurring. It's not a peak in the delta band, it's the left-hand edge rising. Now, there's also artifacts that can give you the same left-hand edge rising. electrodermal artifact, glossokinetic, blah, 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 blah. If you say thumb, 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 or lilt, 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 you can actually see the EEG waving with the tongue. So once in a while, you'll see somebody with an odd delta rhythm, and what they've got is a dyskinetic tongue movement. And tardive dyskinesia can end up being a very difficult one to do a recording for, because they have involuntary tongue movements very commonly. So.
Also with very small children, they'll have suckling patterns even though their mouths are closed. I've seen that one a few times as well. So.
Or seniors with dentures.
Ah, of course, of course. Oh, and the one that just drove my staff crazy for a little bit. Somebody with a secret piece of gum in there. So are you chewing gum? No. They were not chewing. But
I wouldn't admit it to the teacher, huh?
Truth
it's
well
going
told,
under the desk later.
Yeah, so we have to laugh at ourselves as well, that every once in a while there are these, and they can drive you crazy for around 20 minutes until you ask the right question.
Jay, stomach seizures came up. They wanted your thoughts on the link between posterior.
So,
go ahead.
The ancient term, which isn't part of the International Classification of Epilepsy, was abdominal epilepsy. It was a very descriptive term. And what you have is a discharge deep in the sylvian fissure and posterior insula. If you look at the homunculus, you got the feet and the trunk, and then the hands, and then the face as you come down towards the temporal lobe's sylvian fissure as it dips into the fissure. And as you get close to the fissure, you see the inside of the mouth and the tongue hanging out. But as you go in through the sylvian fissure, your entire alimentary tract, all the way through to the other end, all of that is in there. So if you have a discharge there, you can have a spasm in your smooth muscles. It's not a striate muscle that moves the skeleton. It's a smooth muscle. It will spasm, and that's very painful. If you've had an abdominal blockage or some bad episode of gas or something where you had internal, a bad burrito, exactly. Gas station sushi, whatever you did that wasn't a good idea. You can have pain, and that pain is perceived in the insula. The insula can create the pain with motor spasms, and it's also sensing the interoception. It senses your body position. It senses your internal organs. It's all the proprioceptive information is funneled through the insula. Now, the insula is actually an important piece that developed as the human brain developed. The frontal lobe, we think the prefrontal area is the thing that's the difference that we've got that the Mac monkey doesn't have, and it's, for some people, I think it might be just ballast, but, still it's, the frontal lobe. But the frontal lobe grew, but the insula grew more proportionally than the frontal lobe grew. The insula's actually got a 48% larger proportionate gain than the rest of the frontal areas. And it's got two different cell types, granular and agranular. And it's only got one Brodmann area number, 13. Yeah, wouldn't you know, they gave it the number 13, So, and Brodmann was supposed to be saying, well, this area is a different cell structure than this area. And here we have two totally different cell structures, and he didn't differentiate them, probably because he wasn't looking at a human for that section. He looked at an animal for the insula area and only found granular or agranular. But he didn't differentiate. But that was his thing, differentiating based on the exact type of nerve cell. It became a different number. And number 13 really should have a 13A and B because anterior insula, left anterior insula is sympathetic nervous system regulation, right side is parasympathetic regulation, and those two have to balance. And then obviously fight, flight, freeze. The freeze is a parasympathetic overshoot, and that differentiates PTSD from PTSD with dissociation when you see the right anterior insula light up. So that insula is really an important structure. It's hidden. It's an island. Insula is an island, and it's hidden. It's covered over by the frontal lobe overgrowing it. The operculum is what that area is called. F7, F8, roughly in the EEG world, and it's linked to it. On the right insula, which is important for being able to stop inhibiting things. The amygdala and the anterior insula and the operculum, the lateral frontal area, all are your emergency stop mechanism. If you're going to inhibit an emotion or an impulse, that's the network that has to be functional. And you know, a little bit of a right frontal disinhibition will keep you from, you know, inhibiting things you probably shouldn't have done. Oh, I suffer from that one horribly, you know.
Not you.
And what's a flat EEG map?
Sorry?
A flat EEG. Well, first of all, they're not flat. You'll have an EKG unless their heart is gone, in which case they won't even have you doing the EEG, you know. But you'll see EKG card. You'll be turning up the sensitivity to a point where it's ridiculously sensitive. You're going to see heart. You may see some nonspecific slow metabolic changes, but you won't see rhythmicity. There's no background alpha. There's no specific frontal rhythmicity. There's just some non-specific baseline wander and an EKG. And at that point, you don't really have, and you've got it turned up so that instead of a setting of 50 or 70, you end up with a setting of 20. And down to on a dial on a classical EEG machine, that would be a 2, not a 20, but you know, still.
Can I digress a little bit with another question?
Your dime, your dance floor. Go.
Okay. So, you know, when we have a more not flat, but standard EEG, and then of course we have our, or not of course, but, you know, some epileptic or epileptiform bursts in children and violence. Okay. Mm-hmm. Jay, is there any way that you can see that if you don't see the that actively happening? So essentially you can record a child for 20, 30, 40 minutes and it'll never occur. Is there any way you can see that predisposition that's actually linked to not just standard seizure behavior, but the violent seizure behavior?
Yeah, pseudobulbar affect, a fit of rage. Mm-hmm. The term fit used to be used for seizures, but it's not appropriate, you know. But the fit of laughter, a fit of anger, a fit of rage, a fit of crying, all of those fit the pseudobulbar affect. And pseudobulbar affect is a temporal lobe discharge. And if you have instabilities in the temporal lobe and the history of rage events, you can put 2 and 2 together and think that a stabilizing agent. Now, a stabilizing agent in psychiatry could be an antipsychotic, but it could be an anticonvulsant.
Yeah, I frequently see the antipsychotic prescribed, and it doesn't do anything.
No. It does something. It makes it worse.
Thank you.
It makes it worse. Antipsychotics potentiate discharges.
Yeah.
So you're looking crazy. What are they going to give you?
More crazy.
an antipsychotic because you're being crazy. And if it gets worse, what are they going to do? They're going to give you more of the med that you just got.
Yeah.
And it might make you even crazier. You may end up being institutionalized based on an iatrogenic worsening of the discharges in your brain. If you actually were a psychiatrist who looked at the EEG that you were about to treat for the medication, you'd go, oh, well, I can't give them that, I got to go over to my atypical antipsychotic stabilizing agents that some people call anticonvulsants. I'm not treating convulsions because I'm a psychiatrist, not a neurologist. They refer out if it's a seizure, but if there's a seizure discharge, they can treat it with an anticonvulsant as a stabilizing agent, or an atypical antipsychotic is which they'll call it that, because again, they don't want to be accused of practicing neurology. They have the same certificate on the wall, psychiatry, neurology.
Yeah.
But they're not treated equivalently in EEG land. Psychiatrists have to take a neurology residency if they want to become an electroencephalographer. A neurologist just has to take the exam as an electroencephalographer. So they want to take the psychiatry thoughts out of the psychiatrist's head so that they only think of EEG as epilepsy and encephalopathy, because if you start to look at it and see psychiatry, you're seeing things.
We could go on and on and on about that one.
Yeah. I saw things, I published about it, and it turns out that the things I saw were pretty predictive of the endophenotypes, and that they correspond very nicely with the underlying pathophysiologies underlying psychiatry. So,
Jay, your paper came up quite a few times, and then we didn't know which paper, but then somebody from INSR popped in and clarified. I'm guessing it was Joy. Do you want to talk about that paper that you worked with Joy and the other authors on, what that was all about? She made sure we clarified it.
Sure. For quite a few years, I was talking about common EEG failure patterns that I had seen. And eventually, we noticed that this list of 11 patterns that I had seen had 2 that had known genetics, which meant they were endophenotypes. So a genetic linked EEG pattern. And we wrote the paper hypothesizing that the other 9 patterns were also endophenotypic. We just didn't know the genetic linkages yet. And it turns out that was exactly correct. All of them have been identified now. So, wild guess. The Johnson & Johnson's statisticians thought it was a waste of $4 million to do the genotyping. Because how could the EEG predict genetics? Well, apparently they were too stuck on their end of it and not the EEG end of it, so they couldn't see the linkage. But it's obvious if you actually look at it. And EEG interpretation is terrible interrater reliability, because they're trying to declare something normal or abnormal. The endophenotypes are just saying, hey, look over there, there's some of this. Oh, look over there, there's some of that. They're not trying to classify it as normal or abnormal, because normal and abnormal people have all of the phenotypes. It's just how severely they're expressed that determines whether you're symptomatic or not. That's a Mahalanobis distance multivariate statistic. How deviant are you from the centroid? That Mahalanobis distance is greater in pathology and lesser in non-pathology. So the same phenotype is going to be seen in normal people. So we're not trying to...
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. episode. Hey everyone, here's a quick message from our good old buddy Joshua Moore at Alternative Behavioral Therapy.
I'm preparing to do an introduction to QEEG phenotypes. This is my first workshop on the topic, and this is just the introductory overview of the project. This is going to be very, very basic. So let's review each phenotype. We're just going to go through them one by one. If you look at the DSM-1, 2, or 3, and you look at the first chapter, it actually acknowledges that the DSM in mental health is just, quote, a descriptive adaptation, unquote. We're going to customize the interventions and tailor them to the individual's brain activity, not just applying the treatments or trainings to the individual's phenotype and maybe even their variants, but also customizing the protocols themselves to fit that person's individual unique frequency patterns. Maybe a dozen ways to have excessive energy in your nervous system, and then there's an infinite amount of ways to relate poorly to that excessive energy, which means that there is a lot of variations in what someone might call anxiety. And that doesn't mean that we're talking about the same thing when we're talking about anxiety. So complicated stuff. But when we look at a brain map, we get some basis in which we can start talking about what is this energy. Then we have to go to the client. We have to start talking to the client about what is your association to this specific kind of energy that I can see now. Then we get to care about things that insurance doesn't restrict us on. We get to care about like the person in a broader way. 85% improvement in mental health report following pairing a medication with a specific phenotype. You know, geez. Okay, have you seen 85% in any mental health studies for any medication? I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of different types of tests, assessments, and things that can be used that have things called neurocorrelates, which you saw some of those already. Better success outcomes. That's what we really want. We need better predictive power. We need better individualization. That's what we want.
We also talk about liabilities, in terms of that. Yeah. So you're walking around with something that doesn't have the strength to express itself or hasn't met the situation, the environment for it to express itself.
Yeah, not every gene that you have is going to be expressed. You can have the breast cancer gene and think, oh, I got to remove everything I have. And that may be for you the right move, but you may never express it. And, but if you're going to feel more comfortable with, it's your choice. I mean, Jesus, you should have the right to make decisions on your own body, for God's sakes,
Well, careful though. I mean, if we want to just take a mini step there, fear that turns into self-mutilation versus a warning and surgery that'll keep you alive.
Hopefully you're not doing your mastectomy yourself,
Yeah,
self-mutilation.
but you know what I mean? I mean, they're two very, very distinct lenses to put that through.
Yeah.
This is one thing actually, my father used to say, and I think a lot of people way back is, when you look at the quote unquote stats of expression, you have a 50% chance that something will express, but that is not the important statistic. You have a 50% chance that it won't express. So our tendency to always look at the negative. I think that's the case in EEG as well. We have to be really careful. And one of the reasons where many of us are a bit reticent to have this, for example, go into the school system. I think there were even films about this. Because you have a liability, we're going to incarcerate you, or because you, there's a propensity, there's some kind of expressed potential for liability for depression or anxiety, or heck, let's even go into violence, things like that. It's a delicate one, and I think a conversation we should continue to have and repeat and repeat and repeat. Sorry, you got me on the breast cancer one, Jay. I've seen too many women just terrified, absolutely terrified, and some of them, I don't want to say they were false positive genes, but we've got to keep our eyes open, both of them.
There's a lot of men that are a little petrified about the old prostate too,
Yeah. Well,
You know,
that one is a good digression as well. Are you dying of prostate cancer or with prostate cancer?
yeah,
I
at the
believe,
in
yeah,
the age range that it
yeah,
usually is a problem, you
yeah,
probably are going to pass with it as opposed to from
yeah,
it.
yeah. So every male after a certain age is going to have a prostate issue. So, yeah.
Is global data in an EEG a common marker in autism phenotypes? Isn't that in your paper?
In fact, autism is a big, broad group. There is beta spindling in some autistics, not all.
Mhm,
It is a very common pattern,
mhm,
and easily kindled cortex, hyperexcitable cortex, and depending upon where it is, it's going to manifest a bit differently. But yeah, it's not an uncommon pattern in autism.
right.
But then, again, it's a broad spectrum. So you're going to see, oh, there's beta. Oh, there's alpha. Oh, there's theta. Oh, there's delta. And in a given person, they're going to have specific features that end up identifying whether they have a language problem, left hemispheric, or a social perceptual problem on the right side, or attentional and affective regulatory stuff frontally. How hyperexcitable is or is their sensory area? Are they hypersensitive to light and sound and hyperkinetic? Are they jumpy? So you can end up kind of seeing all of that in the EEG. Again, it's individual. There's not a pattern for autism. There's many patterns for autism. It's a spectrum. And within that spectrum, there's lots of things that they've identified. There are little genetic clusters that are unique genetic anomalies that they still lump into autism spectrum, but they've identified it as a specific genetic anomaly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Often,
I like what you said there, Jay, because we're very, very focused on beta with autism, but sometimes, it's total power, right? It's not just in the beta.
how often does Jay see cases where neurofeedback helps with moods tied to post-TBI EEG patterns?
Often.
How often? Do tell.
Those are fairly easy things to see. It may not be the person's primary complaint even. That they come in for sleep problems. I get the terrible insomnia, and their insomnia is fixed. Now they come in and they're freaking happy. Now they didn't come in complaining I have a mood problem and I'm dysphoric. They came in saying I can't sleep. This is terrible. I'm in a rut. Da, da, da. But you fix one thing and the mood ends up as a side effect. Oh no, a side effect. There's some side effects that you really kind of hope for. I'm on steroids to keep me alive. No pituitaries. You have to be on them, otherwise your immune system would kill you within days. And they have a side effect, mood elevation. Oh damn, I'm happier than I should be. Maybe I should take something to make myself not as happy as I am.
Well, you never quite had an issue with that anyways, Jay.
Yeah, I've been a spoiled brat my entire life. I have an excessively euphoric mood state.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get it treated.
Yeah. But no, it's good when a lot of people ask about the side effects, or the negatives. I say the negatives are if you don't know what the hell you're doing. Okay. Power goes both ways. Really very, very important to emphasize.
Yeah.
But no, we do, we talk about brain brightening without even intending to brighten. We have individuals, especially when we work on quieting protocols, they report that they're seeing colors a little bit more. Things are a bit brighter. All kinds of nice things happen when you get in there and sharpen a bit. So.
Yeah. But anything that can be used for positive, that's the foreswing. The backswing sometimes gets you. You got to be careful. And
Well, a little bit more accurate than an axe, I hope.
yeah.
Unless it's yours.
Yeah. Been a long time since I've chopped wood, Pete.
Well, I thought in Canada that's. I'm sorry, Marie.
Hey,
Isn't that your
most of
primary
us
heat
have the
source up
skill
there?
if
You know,
necessary. Yeah.
So
I had
efficacy. Yeah.
I had a house in the woods, and I know that if you use wood heat, it heats you a number of times.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you cut it, when you stack it,
When you
when you
carry
haul it, and then when you burn it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Efficacy raised its ugly head yesterday, and everybody wanted a number on everything. And Joshua had the book out, and we were going through each one and saying, what the numbers are. And ADHD came up, and efficacy of 5. That's a
yeah,
nice number.
yeah. Especially when that's the top of the scale. It's not a 10-point scale. We're halfway there. That's the top of the freaking scale. That's specificity. There's possibly efficacious, probably efficacious, fully efficacious, and
Okay.
and then specific. If they ran a horse race with all the horses, the one that won the race is the specific. You're better than others. Now, that was based on research publications that had to meet criteria for the kinds of research. Historically, back in the day, you could walk through a meeting and hear somebody say, I'm suffering from thus and such, and somebody next to him would say, well, I can treat that. And you'd go, what the hell? What basis do you have to claim that? I mean, that you may have some personal experience with it, may be an anecdote, but there may be a study somewhere. And our field needed to have standards as to what we claimed.
Yeah.
So at the time, APA had the Chambliss criteria, which says probably efficacious, and specific. 3, and our field is small and underfunded, and so we put a possibly in there before the probably, and it requires very little but some evidence. The probably requires the same kind of evidence that the Chambliss requires. But we had 2 organizations, AAPB, which was Don Moss was head of that, and at the time ISNR was foolish enough. I was their president. What were they thinking? So, but I thought we should have some standards for when you could say I can treat that versus I might be able to help with that. We can see there's a possibility I can help with that. There's a probability I can help with that, or I can help with that, or I can help with that better than any other approach. So Don Moss and I decided that our field really couldn't have 2 separate sets of standards, and if they did one and we did one, we'd end up with chaos of competing standards. So we formed a group to make one set of standards for the entire field, which is not easy because journals don't like to publish second.
Yeah.
That they want to be the first one to publish it, and both societies had a journal. We actually had to get the journals to agree to publish on the same day, which is, you have to make threats of violence almost to get them to do that. But we threatened whatever we had to threaten.
What happened to do no harm? What happened?
But also, back to ADHD. I think this is one of that and epilepsy. Were the biggies. I mean, just in terms of the amount of people working on it, the volume of patients, clients, the curious, et cetera. So I mean, we could really stack some info.
Yeah. And as you saw, ADD, ADHD become something that was declared something that was efficacious. The attentional symptoms and other categories like autism, where they have executive control and attentional problems, and impulsivity problems, and so there was some reason to think that we might be able to assist with some of their work, and early on, people gave a try on neurofeedback and autism.
But I
And
mean, very similar to the way a lot of things started. Jay, I don't know how far back you go with working with autism, but essentially it was turn of the century when we had this new issue, and people were absolutely desperate. They were seeking assistance everywhere and essentially getting none. And I think neurotherapy had a reputation for working with populations that others either didn't understand, or were refusing to help at the next level. So I also think that that's how neuro got its foot in autism. And also, I think we were probably one of the first groups to really identify, some of the basic patterns that were going on. And of course, I think we're still the one group holding on that there is a difference between autism and Asperger's, right? So our ability to really go in there and differentiate and help folks, I think that was the second population. But given that there's so much variety and continued variety in autism, I don't know when we're going to get our little check mark there.
Yeah, and I thought the Asperger's was a reasonably useful category term, and in DSM-5, it's gone. So we still use it. I mean, because people understand it. But
why would that happen, Jay? You think? Speculate.
It's that they were trying to get away from just general classification sorts of stuff and have biomarkers and everything in DSM-5, but it failed, and they pulled back from a lot of what they had hoped to do. 2 years before they published it, they announced that it was going to largely be biomarkers and genotypes and phenotypes and a biological basis in psychiatry, but that failed. If there's a DSM-6,
I was going to ask you about that, Jay.
If psychiatry still is around by the time they get a DSM-6, if it hasn't been, shown to be just a bunch of people throwing darts at the wall to try and make guesses, which is really what it is. It's sub-scientific.
Yeah. The good news is we're having a paradigm shift that's happening. I don't know how long it's going to take for it to fully occur. As people retire out, I think it might be easier, but I mean, nobody can ignore the biology here. We have to get away from the checklist. And I don't mind overtly sharing when I have to fill out reports and diagnoses, the huff and the puff that I have, going through this, and a lot of us are in that situation. So I think the days are numbered.
At the APA, which has shrunk dramatically, it's the amazing shrinking organization. The one group that's growing is the biological psychiatry and the biological psychology. And their journals are also very, the impact factor of their journals are way up. So
appropriately so.
So Jay, what happened from 4 to 5, and what do you think will happen with 6? So they're just going to come up with a whole bunch of more numbers and names?
Well, they've been suggesting that they are going to fund research on research domain criteria. So if you have a biomarker that can predict something, that's what they're going to fund. And they're not going to fund things that are just DSM paper and pencil testing things. You've got to have a biomarker, a genotype, phenotype, blood test, some lab type test. If you're a cardiologist and everybody who came to you complaining of chest pain was referred for an angioplasty, half of them actually just had indigestion. The symptom shouldn't predict the treatment. The symptom should predict the testing, which should predict the treatment. And psychiatry is missing that testing, the validation. you can make a good clinical guess. I think this guy's crazy, and then validate the guess by some test that actually shows something that's not right. And at that point, you're going to be more guided than the assumption that they're crazy. You have to have a biomarker that's associated with a specific treatment. If all you know is something's wrong inside, you don't know how to treat. And that's pretty much the situation in psychiatry, that they know something's wrong inside and they make guesses. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. And if one med doesn't work, you try another. And if that doesn't work, you try another. But meds, you have to give them a try for a month, and that's expensive. And if it's the wrong one, you might have a bad side effect. And even if it's not the right one, you might have a bad withdrawal. You're on serotonin and you're having a serotonin withdrawal after being on it for a month. So
it's expensive emotionally as well. Yeah.
So, to try it and you'll like it, or try it and we'll see if you don't like it. And if you don't like it, we can give you another one to try. My grandmother was right. Don't dive in until you know what's under the surface. She was talking about swimming, but, it's just true about most things.
Dr. Marie, where have you been?
Where have I been? Well, I'm Canada now, but I'm next week I'm off again, flying across the world. Gonna hunker down and finish off my research. So
we live through you, so these meetings that you go to, clue us in, wet or whistle.
Oh gosh, I don't know the last one I was at.
What are people talking about out there?
There's a BFE meeting recently.
BFE, yes, I was at the BFE. There again, we presented the research on the app. I should announce the focus. A little bit behind schedule, all my fault in terms of tabulating the data. But hopefully we're going to be launching that completely in 2 to 4 weeks. And it's a really, really strong app. Jay, you're talking about targeting very specific forms of focus, from, those that are classic in cognitive decline, word retrieval, a bit of memory loss, slowing down, versus exam anxiety, creative focus, all of that. So we're really, really proud of this. That should be launching hopefully in 2 to 4 weeks, if I can hide and write it up. So that's the really good stuff. Yeah. And then I think a nice little pause. Many folks are going to ISNR. I don't know whether I'm going or not, because I've got to finish up the research. But on that note, unfortunately, confirming with the wonderful talk noodle, that's at 3 a.m. where I'm off to. So here it conflicts with 4 p.m., the #1 client hour, and then when I'm in Europe, it's 3 a.m. So unless I'm going to end up.
Just hop on after the bars. You'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So.
And then where can we find that app, Dr. Marie?
swinglesonic.com. The brain calm is out. The research is all out and strong. The insomnia, or this week it's called the sleep is out. Brain calm is out, and focus should be out in 2 to 4 weeks.
Jay, I'm itching for a birthday party in October. Know anybody?
Yeah, there's going to be a luau, because I had eye surgery this year, and the group is so crazy. They're calling this Gunkelman's Island, for like Gilligan's Island.
Aye.
So the whole meeting theme is going to have like Hawaiian shirts. If you come, you get laid. They'll lay around your neck as when you register.
Thank you.
You
should charge more.
You too can get one of these personally from me. Just is just a token. But I sent a bunch of them to AAPB with Renita. She went to visit with. She's got friends in the field, and I can't travel, so she went to the meeting and hung out there, and gave away coins. But they were maybe a couple dozen I sent down, she ran out of them. People were still asking her. So
well, they are challenging.
They're apparently popular little things. So, and I've got another coin too that's being made that will be handed out there as well. So, those are my little things. I don't get out, so I do stupid things while I'm here, making coins and stuff. But
Having fun, Jay. Nothing stupid about fun.
we're getting together the evening of the 8th for reception, and then the 9th, 10th, and 11th there are 3 days of neuroscience meetings. The evening of the 11th is the Hawaiian luau, and it should be good science and good fun, and a quiet little burg that we're in, and it's a little walkable downtown. People should have a good time.
Absolutely.
We kind of take, 80 people pretty much take over the downtown on this little burg. So it's the event is close. It's not one where nobody meets everybody. Everybody will meet everybody. So anyway, it's a fun group. Even though I'm in it, they do have fun.
A lot of brain power.
The one time we know you're not an avatar. You actually exist in the flesh, in the person.
Well, if you call this existing,
Aw.
I stay happy. I very seldom leave the house. Even I mean, I go out to the yard, but I don't get out because it's just too big a risk. And but once a year I get out to this. This weekend, there's a local politician I like, so she's having a big thing at a winery, and I'm one of her donors, so I'll pop in for that for about an hour. They're going to sit and have a meal and everything, but I can't unmask to do that. So when I go out, you see more of me on this show than anybody sees me when I'm out. I'm masked. I took the mask off in the OR because everybody else was masked and it was in an OR, but I didn't unmask until I was in the OR and everybody else was masked up for my eye surgery. So when you have a brain leak and the common cold can kill you, you kind of are extra cautious. So
darn tootin'.
And if I was younger and healthier, I'd have a couple surgeries to patch the leak. But the problem with that is if you patch the leak, then my brain would pressurize again. So that it popped the seal for a reason. Inflammatory changes happen and your brain swells and the pressure was there. And it would always give me a hell of a headache.
You just need one of those tire valves right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Maple syrup tap.
So ever since it started leaking, my bad eye, which used to be really, really badly wavy, has settled down. It's not right. I can't use it for proper vision yet, but it's better than it was. I can almost converge the images. So.
Well, Jay Gunkelman, Dr. Marie Swingle, thank you for showing up for another great episode of the NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback Podcast, answering all the unanswered questions from the Q&A we have on Wednesday nights, 6 p.m. Central. Got a question? Just ask or email Pete at neuronoodle.com. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you, guys.
Glad you guys had a good time last night. Bye-bye.
We always do. We need you guys back. And you too, Joy.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Hey everyone, here's a quick message from our good old buddy Joshua Moore at Alternative Behavioral Therapy.
I'm preparing to do an introduction to QEEG phenotypes. This is my first workshop on the topic, and this is just the introductory overview of the project. This is going to be very, very basic. So let's review each phenotype. We're just going to go through them one by one. If you look at the DSM-1, 2, or 3, and you look at the first chapter, it actually acknowledges that the DSM in mental health is just, quote, a descriptive adaptation, unquote. We're going to customize the interventions and tailor them to the individual's brain activity, not just applying the treatments or trainings to the individual's phenotype and maybe even their variants, but also customizing the protocols themselves to fit that person's individual unique frequency patterns. Maybe a dozen ways to have excessive energy in your nervous system, and then there's an infinite amount of ways to relate poorly to that excessive energy, which means that there is a lot of variations in what someone might call anxiety. And that doesn't mean that we're talking about the same thing when we're talking about anxiety. So complicated stuff. But when we look at a brain map, we get some basis in which we can start talking about what is this energy. Then we have to go to the client. We have to start talking to the client about what is your association to this specific kind of energy that I can see now. Then we get to care about things that insurance doesn't restrict us on. We get to care about like the person in a broader way. 85% improvement in mental health report following pairing a medication with a specific phenotype. Geez. Okay, have you seen 85% in any mental health studies for any medication? I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of different types of tests, assessments, and things that can be used that have things called neurocorrelates, which you saw some of those already, better success outcomes. That's what we really want. We need better predictive power. We need better individualization. That's what we want.